The restaurant glowed in soft gold light, the kind that made crystal glasses shimmer and whispers travel farther than they should. At the center of the dining hall sat Sophie, wearing a red dress she had saved for a night that truly mattered. Her fingers intertwined nervously over the tablecloth while a small smile trembled on her lips. From the corner, 3 co-workers filmed discreetly, their phones half hidden behind menus, recording her every hopeful glance toward the door. Tonight, the joke wasn't just cruel, it was rehearsed. Each tick of the clock felt like a public announcement of her waiting. She adjusted the collar of her dress and tried to appear calm, unaware that every move was fuel for laughter behind the kitchen doors. The room seemed to breathe around her, conversations fading, waiters slowing their steps, as if the air itself knew something was off. Her reflection shimmered faintly on the wineglass, and she whispered to herself, "He'll come." He said he would. A burst of quiet giggles echoed from a nearby table. Jake, Mia, and Carla exchanged looks, their eyes sparkling with anticipation. The plan had worked better than they'd imagined. Sophie was sitting right where they wanted her, vulnerable, sincere, and unaware of the invisible audience mocking her. "She actually believed it," Mia whispered, shaking her head. Jake smirked, pressing record. "Let's make sure we get the moment he doesn't show up." Sophie's heart fluttered each time the entrance doors opened. A couple walked in, then an older man, then no one. Minutes turned into an hour. Still, she sat there, polite, patient, too proud to look hurt. Her co-workers, failing to contain their laughter, pretended to polish silverware while recording her silent heartbreak. The irony was cruel. The kindest person in the restaurant was now its cruelest entertainment. Then it happened. The doors swung open again, and the laughter died instantly. A tall man in a tailored navy suit stepped in, confident, calm, and distinctly out of place among the crowd. His eyes swept the room with quiet authority until they landed on Sophie. She froze. Her breath caught. Could it be him? Could the message have been real after all? The man walked forward, his polished shoes echoing across the marble floor. The waitstaff instinctively straightened, whispering his name in disbelief. It wasn't a stranger. It wasn't a date. It was Mr. Harris, the CEO of the restaurant's parent company, here for an unannounced visit. The phones that once filmed in mockery now lowered in fear. Sophie blinked rapidly, trying to understand why he was walking toward her. He stopped by her table. The silence was sharp enough to cut through glass. Sophie opened her mouth to explain, but words betrayed her. Mr. Harris looked at the untouched wine glass, the empty seat across from her, and then the anxious faces watching from behind the bar. His expression softened, not with pity, but with curiosity. "May I?" he asked gently, pulling the chair across from her. Every camera lowered, every smirk faded. The same co-workers who orchestrated the prank now watched in disbelief as the CEO sat down at Sophie's table, uninvited yet perfectly composed. Sophie's hands trembled under the tablecloth. I think there's been a mistake," she stammered, her voice barely audible. But Mr. Harris simply nodded, his tone calm, his presence commanding the entire room's attention. From the kitchen window, Jake whispered, "What is he doing?" Mia swallowed hard. "He knows." The phones, once tools of ridicule, were now heavy with guilt. Sophie sat motionless, her heart pounding loud enough for her to hear it in her ears. For a moment, she wished the floor would open and swallow her whole. But instead of shame, something unexpected filled the air. Silence, respect, anticipation. The candle between them flickered, its flame dancing like a secret trying to escape. Mr. Harris leaned forward slightly, eyes kind yet sharp, as if reading every unspoken truth on her face. "You thought I wouldn't come," he said softly. Not a question, but a revelation. Sophie blinked, confused. Behind them, no one dared breathe. The prank that began with laughter was now balanced on the edge of something much deeper, and in that suspended moment, before anyone could guess what would happen. Next, the world inside that restaurant seemed to hold its breath. Before we uncover what the CEO will do next, take a second. What would you do if you were in his place? Would you laugh or stand up for her? Hit subscribe, give this story a like, and tell us in the comments what you think will happen next. Long before that unforgettable night, Sophie's life followed a quiet rhythm of exhaustion and hope. Each morning began before sunrise, when the city still slept under a thin veil of mist. She would tie her hair into a neat bun, pin her name tag over her uniform, and whisper a promise to herself. Someday, things will be different. The streets smelled of rain and coffee, and Sophie carried both the scent of ambition and fatigue in every step she took toward the restaurant. Her co-workers never understood her optimism. "You really think you'll own a restaurant someday?" Jake had once teased, tossing a towel over his shoulder. Sophie just smiled, polishing glasses behind the bar. "Everyone starts somewhere," she said softly, but her words, simple and sincere, often drew smirks instead of support. In a place where sarcasm was a survival skill, kindness was often mistaken for weakness. Sophie's world was small, a one-room apartment with a flickering light bulb and a window that overlooked a parking lot. Yet inside that modest space lived her greatest dreams. On the wall, a single photograph hung, a cozy cafe by the beach, sunlight streaming through its open doors. "Sophie's place," she had written in pencil beneath it. Sometimes she would look at the photo before bed, imagining the sound of laughter and the smell of fresh bread. At work, she moved like a melody. She remembered regulars' names, noticed when a guest's smile was forced, and always added an extra cherry to children's desserts. Her kindness wasn't calculated. It was her default setting. But not everyone saw it that way. Mia, one of the senior servers, often rolled her eyes. "You're wasting your energy, Soph. No one tips better because you smile," she'd say. Sophie would just shrug. "Maybe they don't, but I still sleep better." Still, there were moments when loneliness pressed on her chest like an invisible weight. After closing, when the restaurant lights dimmed and laughter faded into silence, Sophie would sit at a corner booth with her notebook. She scribbled recipes, ideas for decor, names for future menus. Her handwriting curved. Delicately, as if she feared breaking the paper, these quiet hours were when her dreams felt most alive and most fragile. Sometimes her boss would catch her writing. "Still dreaming big, huh?" he'd ask, half amused, half dismissive. She would smile, hiding the notebook quickly. "Just keeping busy." He didn't mean harm, but the words lingered, echoing like doubt. Each remark chipped away at her confidence, yet never fully destroyed it. There was something unshakable in Sophie, a faith that even small acts of goodness could lead somewhere. The irony was that her hard work rarely brought praise. Customers adored her, but among her peers, she was an easy target. When others complained, she volunteered. When they slacked, she covered. "You make us look bad," Jake once muttered after she picked up his shift. She only replied, "No, I just want things to run smoothly." But behind her politeness hid a quiet ache, the wish to belong, not just to serve. Her one source of joy outside work was her evening class at the community college. It wasn't much, just a few hours of hospitality training twice a week, but to her it felt like stepping closer to that picture on her wall. She would arrive still smelling faintly of coffee and perfume, sitting near the front, absorbing every word from the instructor. "You remind me of myself years ago," her teacher once said. "Keep that spark alive." Sophie had smiled all the way home that night, yet dreams, no matter how bright, often invite envy. The same co-workers who once ignored her began to whisper about her good girl act, suggesting she only wanted attention. The more she tried to ignore it, the louder it became. Laughter, smirks, careless comments, and somewhere in that growing shadow of jealousy, the cruel idea of the fake date began to form. Back then, Sophie had no reason to suspect anything. She believed in people the way some believe in miracles, fully, recklessly, beautifully. Her trust was her flaw, and her strength, all at once. And as she closed the restaurant one evening, humming softly while wiping down tables, the seeds of betrayal were already being planted behind her back, wrapped in laughter she couldn't yet hear. The restaurant, after closing, always carried a strange calm. The hum of the refrigerators, the clatter of cutlery being stacked, and the faint echo of laughter bouncing off the empty walls. On one such night, Jake leaned against the counter, his apron half undone, scrolling through his phone. "She's too good for her own good," he muttered, smirking. Mia and Carla, wiping down tables nearby, looked up with curiosity. "Who? Sophie again?" Mia asked, rolling her eyes. Jake nodded. "You have to admit, it's funny how she actually believes people like her." Mia laughed softly, though her tone carried a sharp edge. "She just tries too hard. Always smiling, always helping. It's annoying." Carla, quieter but eager to fit in, hesitated before joining in. "She's harmless, Jake. Let her dream." But Jake wasn't interested in harmless. He was bored, restless, craving the kind of amusement that came from someone else's expense. "What if we gave her a little reality check?" he said, his grin widening. The phrase hung in the air like a spark, searching for kindling. Mia's eyebrows lifted. "What do you mean?" Jake shrugged casually, tossing a spoon into a sink full of suds. "I mean, she wants romance, right? She wants to believe someone important sees her. So let's make it happen. Let's set her up on a date she'll never forget." The laughter that followed was hesitant at first, then meaner, sharper, like knives being tested on innocence. Carla frowned. "You're not serious." But Jake already was. "We'll make a fake profile. Someone rich, someone charming. Maybe even say he's a CEO. Mia's smirk returned. "Oh, that's evil." "Exactly," Jake replied, pleased. "We'll message her, invite her here, make it sound romantic, and when she's all dressed up and waiting," he mimed holding a camera, "we capture her face when no one shows up." For a moment, even Mia hesitated. "That's kind of cruel, Jake." But he shrugged. "It's a joke. Everyone needs to laugh once in a while." Carla's silence lingered longer this time, but the pull of belonging, of not being the outsider, silenced her better judgment. "Fine," she said quietly, "but we keep it between us." Jake grinned, already creating the account on his phone. Of course, just a harmless prank. That night, under the cold glow of fluorescent lights, they built the illusion piece by piece. A fake name, a profile picture of a handsome man in a suit, a carefully worded message, "Dinner with me at La Belle Maison tomorrow night. I've noticed your kindness, and I'd love to know you better." Mia added a wink emoji before sending it. They all leaned in, watching the screen like hunters waiting for their trap to spring. When Sophie's phone buzzed across the dining hall, she was sweeping the floor near the door. She picked it up, her eyes lighting up as she read the message. None of them missed that fleeting look, the hope, the disbelief, the innocent smile. "She bought it," Jake whispered triumphantly. "Hook, line, and sinker." The cruelty of the moment passed between them like a secret handshake. Later, as they clocked out, Carla lingered by the lockers. Her reflection in the metal door looked back at her, uncertain, ashamed. "Do you really think this is funny?" she asked softly. Jake zipped up his jacket. "You'll see tomorrow. It'll be legendary." Mia laughed, tossing her apron into the laundry bin. She'll survive. It's just Sophie. The door closed behind them, leaving the break room empty and cold. Outside, the night air carried the smell of rain, washing the streets clean, except for the stain they had just left behind. Sophie walked home alone under the same sky, clutching her phone, rereading the message again and again, her heart trembling between disbelief and joy. Behind her, the restaurant's neon sign flickered once before going dark, as if it too hesitated to be part of what was coming. The message glowed softly on Sophie's cracked phone screen, as if it carried the warmth her tiny apartment lacked. Dinner with me at La Belle Maison tomorrow night. I've noticed your kindness, and I'd love to know you better. Her heart skipped a beat. For a long moment, she simply stared, unsure if she was dreaming. The words felt too perfect, like they had been written by someone who saw her, truly saw her, beneath the uniform and exhaustion. She sat on her bed, still in her work clothes, replaying every kind gesture she'd ever made, wondering which one could have drawn this mysterious man's attention. Maybe he had been one of the regulars, the polite businessman who always tipped well, or the one who complimented her smile. Hope bloomed quietly inside her chest, cautious but persistent. Someone noticed, she whispered. Someone finally noticed. The next morning, Sophie woke up with a lightness she hadn't felt in years. The city outside seemed softer, the sunlight gentler. As she brushed her hair in the bathroom mirror, she rehearsed how she might greet him. Should she shake his hand, offer a hug? Her cheeks flushed at the thought. For once, life seemed to be offering something kind, something she didn't have to fight for. At work, she moved through her shift with a quiet glow that even her coworkers couldn't ignore. Mia watched her hum while arranging flowers on the counter. Someone's in a good mood, she said, exchanging a sly grin with Jake. Sophie smiled shyly. Just feeling grateful today. Jake's tone was playful but loaded. Well, keep that smile. You'll need it tonight. She didn't notice the mockery in his voice. She only heard encouragement. During her break, she reread the messages. Short, polite, but full of promise. Whoever he was, he seemed thoughtful, even asking about her favorite dishes. I love risotto, she typed with a small laugh, biting her lip before sending it. The reply came quickly. Then risotto it is. Her heart fluttered. She took that as a sign that fate, in its mysterious kindness, had finally remembered her name. That evening, Sophie opened her wardrobe and pulled out the red dress she had kept folded for years. It wasn't new, but it was special. The one she'd bought after her first paycheck, promising herself she'd wear it for someone who made her feel seen. The mirror reflected not just her image, but the version of herself she longed to be. Confident, graceful, worthy. She smiled at her reflection, whispering, "Tonight, maybe I'll finally belong." She dabbed perfume behind her ears, a small bottle she rarely used, and tied her hair with care. Her reflection looked back, a mixture of nerves and joy. On her dresser, she placed her mother's old bracelet, slightly tarnished but full of sentimental weight. "For luck," she murmured. Outside, the hum of evening traffic mixed with the faint sound of rain beginning to fall, tapping gently against her. Window like a warning she couldn't hear. Meanwhile, across town, Jake and Mia sat in the staff room, scrolling through the fake account they had created. "She's really falling for it," Mia whispered, half amused, half uneasy. Jake laughed. "Tomorrow will be priceless. I'll bring my camera." Carla looked away, guilt pressing on her chest. "Maybe we should stop," she muttered. But Jake brushed it off. "Relax, it's just a joke. She'll laugh about it later." The others didn't respond. Back in her apartment, Sophie grabbed her purse and checked her phone one last time. The fake profile had sent one final message. "I'll meet you at 7. Don't be late." She smiled, her pulse quickening. The rain had stopped now, leaving the streets glistening under the lamplight. As she stepped outside, she pulled her coat tight, unaware that every step toward the restaurant was a step into someone else's lie. She didn't know that behind the polished walls of La Belle Maison, laughter was already being planned. She didn't know that her kindness had become a target. All she knew was that she was about to live a night she'd remember forever. Not for love found, but for truth revealed. And as she disappeared into the glow of the city, the red of her dress was the only color brave enough to challenge the darkness waiting ahead. The morning of the date arrived with a quiet thrill that Sophie couldn't contain. She woke early, long before her alarm, and spent extra time getting ready for work, polishing her shoes, tying her apron perfectly, humming softly to the tune of her excitement. The whole world seemed lighter that day, as if the universe itself conspired to make her glow. Even her walk to the restaurant felt different. The city's noise seemed to harmonize with her heartbeat. Inside La Belle Maison, the atmosphere buzzed with routine, silverware clinking, coffee steaming, laughter floating through the air. But beneath the surface, something colder stirred. Jake, Mia, and Carla exchanged knowing glances as Sophie clocked in, her joy radiant and unsuspecting. "You look nice today," Mia said, pretending to compliment her. Sophie blushed. "Oh, it's nothing special," she replied shyly, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. Jake smirked. "Save that modesty for tonight." Throughout the day, Sophie worked harder than ever, partly to calm her nerves, and partly because that's who she was, devoted to every detail. She served tables, remembered orders by heart, and made guests feel seen. Yet her mind drifted constantly to the evening ahead. She imagined how it would feel to be on the other side of the table, not as the waitress, but as the one being served. It was a small dream, but it made her heart dance. In the break room, the conspirators' whispers grew sharper. Jake checked his phone, ensuring the fake account's messages stayed convincing. "She still thinks it's real," he said. "She's probably picking out a dress right now." Mia chuckled, though her laughter lacked its usual confidence. "You really think the CEO angle isn't too much?" Jake waved her concern away. "She's naive enough to believe anything that sounds kind." Carla bit her lip, staring at the floor. This isn't funny anymore. By late afternoon, the plan was in full motion. Jake had stationed a small camera behind the counter, perfectly angled toward the table Sophie had chosen, near the window, under soft, golden light. "That's our stage," he said. Mia nodded uneasily. "What if someone finds out?" "They won't," Jake replied. "We'll delete everything after, just a few laughs." The words hung heavy in the air, unconvincing even to himself. When Sophie finished her shift, she rushed to the staff room, heart racing with both nerves and excitement. She opened her locker and took out a small bag. Inside it, her red dress, neatly folded since the night before. The air smelled faintly of perfume and polished wood. She changed quietly, her movements delicate, reverent, as if she were preparing for something sacred. The mirror reflected not just her face, but her faith in the good she believed still existed in people. Meanwhile, the others lingered near the kitchen door, pretending to tidy up, but really waiting for the show to begin. Jake adjusted his phone camera. "We'll start filming when she sits," he whispered. "Get her reaction when she realizes no one's coming." Mia crossed her arms, her stomach tightening. "You're sure about this?" Jake grinned. "Relax. It's just harmless fun." But even he avoided meeting her eyes, a quiet hint of doubt flickering beneath his bravado. Sophie emerged from the staff room moments later, radiant in her red dress, her hair curled softly over her shoulders. Conversations in the restaurant slowed as she stepped onto the floor. She smiled nervously, unaware of the curious glances following her. "You look stunning," Carla murmured, guilt heavy in her tone. Sophie beamed. "Thank you. I'm meeting someone special tonight." Jake turned away, biting back a grin. She walked toward the reserved table where a single candle flickered and 2 glasses of wine waited. The piano music in the background played a tender melody that wrapped around her like a promise. She adjusted the napkin in her lap, her fingers trembling slightly. Every tick of the clock felt like a countdown to something magical or catastrophic. Still, she believed. Still, she waited. Behind her, laughter began to stir. Soft at first, then stifled. Jake's phone camera was ready. Sophie's heart pounded with nervous joy, her gaze fixed on the door. The scent of lavender from her perfume mingled with the aroma of roasted garlic and wine. The night was perfect, at least on the surface, but under that perfection, cruelty hid in plain sight, and fate was about to take its first quiet step toward justice. The restaurant glimmered with warmth that evening, its chandeliers painting gold patterns across the marble floor. The hum of conversations filled the air, but to Sophie, every sound seemed distant, muffled by the pounding of her own heart. She sat at the reserved table, her red dress catching the candlelight like a quiet flame. The clock above the bar ticked softly, but each second felt louder than the last. She kept glancing toward the door, her smile delicate, hopeful, trembling. At first, she felt giddy. Every time the door opened, she straightened, convinced it might be him. A couple entered, laughing softly. She smiled at them, then looked back down at her hands. A waiter passed with a tray of desserts, the scent of chocolate and espresso filling the air. Her reflection shimmered faintly on the silverware. "He'll come," she whispered, voice barely audible. "He said 7. Minutes stretched into half an hour. The wine glass in front of her remained untouched, the condensation slowly fading away. The waiters had begun to notice, exchanging small glances as they moved between tables. Sophie forced herself to stay composed, resting her hands in her lap, pretending to check her phone as if to reassure herself that everything was fine. Her coworkers, hidden behind the counter, were barely containing their laughter. Jake nudged Mia. "Look at her, she's still waiting," he whispered, holding his phone steady. Mia frowned, discomfort stirring in her chest. "Maybe we've done enough," she murmured. But Jake ignored her, zooming in on Sophie's face, capturing every flicker of her fragile hope. "This is gold," he said. Carla stood beside them, her arms crossed tightly. She couldn't even look. The cruel excitement that once fueled them was beginning to taste like regret. Sophie checked her messages again. Nothing, not even a polite excuse. She tried to smile, though her reflection in the wineglass betrayed her disappointment. A waiter approached hesitantly. "Would you like me to refresh your drink, ma'am?" She shook her head gently. "No, thank you. I'm sure he'll be here soon." Her voice wavered, but she managed to sound kind, even in waiting. That was her nature. Grace, even when the world turned unkind. 40 minutes passed. The laughter from the kitchen grew louder, less subtle now. Sophie noticed the glances, the smirks quickly hidden behind menus, the whispering near the bar. Her throat tightened, and for the first time her eyes stung. She wanted to leave, but something stopped her. Maybe pride, maybe hope. She adjusted the candle slightly, as if giving herself one last moment before accepting the truth. "Don't cry," she told herself. "Not here." Then, just as her resolve began to crumble, the doors at the entrance opened again. The chatter in the restaurant softened. A tall figure stepped inside, dressed in a navy suit, posture calm, presence commanding. Conversations quieted as the man looked around, scanning the room with quiet authority. Sophie's breath caught. Could it be him? Could this actually be real? Every pair of eyes turned toward the door, including those who had orchestrated the prank. Jake's laughter stopped mid-breath. His phone lowered slightly as confusion washed over his face. "Wait, that's not," Mia whispered sharply. "That's Mr. Harris." The color drained from Jake's cheeks. Carla's eyes widened. The CEO, the real one, had just walked into the restaurant. None of them understood why he was there that night, but fate had arrived, uninvited and perfectly timed. Sophie rose slightly from her chair, unsure of what to do. Mr. Harris's gaze moved across the room, taking in the scene, the elegant table set for two, the untouched glass of wine, and the uncomfortable silence spreading like wildfire. He noticed the staff's uneasy posture, the phones that suddenly disappeared into aprons. Then his eyes met Sophie's, her confusion, her vulnerability, her quiet dignity, all visible in that single fragile moment. The entire room seemed to hold its breath as he walked toward her. Each step echoed across the floor, steady and deliberate. Sophie's pulse raced, her thoughts tangled in disbelief. Was this really happening? She wanted to speak, to explain, but her voice failed her. When he finally stopped by her table, he gave a small nod, respectful, calm. "May I sit?" he asked softly. Sophie could only nod. The laughter in the room had vanished. In its place, something heavier took root. Silence, the kind that comes before revelation. When Mr. Harris sat across from Sophie, the entire restaurant seemed to lose its sound. Even the clinking of cutlery faded into nothing. His presence carried a quiet gravity, not loud, not intimidating, but commanding. Sophie's breath trembled as she looked at him, still unsure if she should smile or apologize. I think there's been a mistake," she finally whispered. Mr. Harris tilted his head slightly, studying her face with calm curiosity. "Is that so?" he asked. From the kitchen doorway, Jake's knuckles whitened around his phone. He had stopped recording but couldn't look away. The prank that once promised laughter now twisted in his stomach like guilt. Mia whispered, "He's really sitting with her." Jake swallowed hard. He knows something's up. Carla, standing behind them, whispered a quiet prayer, not for herself, but for Sophie. For once, she wanted kindness to win. Mr. Harris glanced at the half-empty glass of wine, the empty chair opposite Sophie, and the faint shimmer of tears gathering in her eyes. "You've been waiting long," he said softly, though it wasn't a question. Sophie nodded, embarrassed. "Yes, sir, but it's all right." She tried to force a smile. "I'm sure he got caught up with work." He leaned back in his chair, expression unreadable. "I see. And this man you were waiting for? Who is he?" Sophie hesitated, her hands twisting nervously in her lap. "He said he was a CEO," she murmured, cheeks burning. Mr. Harris's eyebrows rose slightly. "A CEO?" The irony wasn't lost on him. Waiters exchanged nervous glances, pretending to polish glasses that were already spotless. Jake felt sweat on his palms. "He's going to find out," he whispered to Mia, but she didn't respond. She was staring at Sophie, and for the first time she wasn't laughing. The air grew heavier with every passing second. Mr. Harris placed his napkin on the table and said quietly, "You work here, don't you?" Sophie nodded. "Yes, sir." "And your colleagues? They're working tonight as well?" She nodded again, her voice barely audible. "They are." He glanced briefly toward the kitchen window, where Jake and Mia stood frozen, their eyes wide with guilt. His gaze lingered, not angry, not yet, but enough to make the truth ripple through the room like a storm forming on the horizon. Sophie tried to speak again, but her voice cracked. "I didn't mean to cause trouble. I thought—" She stopped, the weight of humiliation pressing against her chest. Harris leaned forward slightly, his tone soft but firm. "You thought someone cared enough to see you?" The words hit her heart like truth she didn't want to admit. Her eyes welled with tears, but she blinked them back quickly. "I'm sorry," she whispered, though she had done nothing wrong. Mr. Harris's expression softened. "Don't be." He turned his attention toward the kitchen. "Perhaps someone else should be." The words weren't loud, but they carried across the dining room like thunder wrapped in silk. Conversations ceased entirely. Every head turned toward the staff area. Jake felt his throat tighten. His usual arrogance had vanished, replaced by a cold fear he couldn't disguise. Mia lowered her gaze, her heart pounding. Then, breaking the silence, Mr. Harris called out calmly, "Would the evening staff please join us?" The sentence was polite, but no one mistook it for a request. The entire restaurant watched as Jake, Mia, and Carla stepped out slowly, their faces pale. Sophie turned, confused. "What's happening?" she whispered. Mr. Harris looked at her with quiet reassurance. "Just a little truth, Miss Sophie. It's long overdue." Jake tried to speak first. "Sir, this was a joke?" Mr. Harris interrupted, his tone sharper now. "At whose expense?" His eyes moved from Jake to Mia, then to the phone still visible in Jake's hand. The color drained from his face completely. "Delete it," Mr. Harris ordered quietly. "Now." Jake fumbled with the device, pressing buttons with trembling hands, while the rest of the room watched in heavy silence. Sophie sat motionless, trying to make sense of what was unfolding. The man she thought might mock her had instead defended her without raising his voice, and though she didn't yet understand why, something in Mr. Harris's calm unsettled her. Not because she feared him, but because she sensed he wasn't finished. Justice, it seemed, had only just arrived at the table. For a long, breathless moment, no one dared to move. The soft music that had once floated through the restaurant now felt like an insult to the silence that had taken its place. Mr. Harris remained seated, his posture calm but unyielding. Jake's phone trembled in his hand as he hovered over the delete button. I didn't mean anything by it," he stammered. "It was just a joke." Mr. Harris raised an eyebrow. "A joke?" he repeated slowly, as if tasting the word and finding it sour. Sophie's eyes darted between them, confusion and shame colliding inside her. "I don't understand," she whispered. "What's going on?" Her co-workers avoided her gaze, their earlier bravado gone. Mia tried to speak, but guilt caught in her throat. "Sophie, we—" Her voice broke. Jake cut her off, desperate to control the story. "It wasn't personal, all right? We just thought it would be funny." The words hung in the air, heavy and cruel. Sophie froze, realization dawning painfully. Her breath caught. You did this?" she asked, her voice cracking on the last word. No one answered, but the silence told her everything she needed to know. Her hands trembled as she looked down at her lap, her fingers clutching the edge of her napkin until it wrinkled. A single tear slipped down her cheek, catching the glow of the candle before falling soundlessly onto the tablecloth. Around them, the other diners watched, uncomfortable witnesses to someone's breaking heart. Mr. Harris leaned back slightly, folding his hands together. "Tell me," he said quietly, his gaze fixed on Jake. "What was the goal? To humiliate her? To record her pain and share it for amusement?" Jake swallowed hard, unable to meet his eyes. "We didn't think it would go this far," he muttered. Mr. Harris nodded slowly. "It never does, until it does." His tone was calm, but every syllable cut deeper than anger ever could. Carla stepped forward, her voice trembling. "It was wrong, sir. We knew it. I should have stopped it." Mr. Harris looked at her with the faintest nod, acknowledging the courage it took to admit the truth. "And yet, you didn't," he said softly. Carla's lips quivered. "No," she whispered, her voice breaking. "I didn't." He let the moment sit, letting the weight of her honesty fill the room. Sophie couldn't look up. Her world had narrowed to shame and disbelief. Mr. Harris finally turned to Sophie. "Miss Sophie," he said, his tone gentle now, "do you have anything you wish to say?" Her voice came out in a whisper. "I just wanted to believe someone saw me for who I am." She looked up, her tearful eyes meeting his. "I never thought kindness could make people hate me." The words pierced through the room like a quiet thunderclap. No one dared move. Even the waiters stood still, their hands frozen over trays. The CEO's jaw tightened, but his voice remained even. "Kindness doesn't make people hate you, Sophie," he said. "It exposes those who fear what they've lost." His gaze returned to the staff. "Tell me, what have you lost? Decency, empathy, the courage to respect those who serve beside you?" His words echoed, low and powerful. Jake's shoulders sank. Mia covered her face, unable to bear it. The cruelty that had once felt like a joke now burned like shame. For the first time that night, Sophie found her voice again. "Please," she said quietly, "just don't fire them. I don't want more pain tonight." Her tone carried no bitterness, only fatigue. Mr. Harris studied her for a moment, the faintest glimmer of admiration in his eyes. "You'd still defend them after this?" he asked. She nodded slowly. "Someone has to end it." It wasn't forgiveness, not yet, but it was grace. And it silenced everyone. Mr. Harris rose from his chair. "No one's being fired," he said finally. Relief flickered across a few faces until he added, "But we will be having a different kind of meeting tomorrow, one that will remind everyone here what respect means." He turned toward Sophie. "As for you, Miss Sophie, finish your meal, on the house." She looked up, startled. "Sir, Please," he interrupted softly. "It's the least we can do." As he walked away, the staff stood frozen, the air thick with remorse. Sophie sat there for a moment longer, staring at the flickering candle between the two glasses. The prank had collapsed under the weight of its own cruelty, leaving behind only truth and trembling hearts. Somewhere in that silence, the first seeds of change were planted, watered not by anger, but by the quiet dignity of a woman who refused to lose her kindness. The following morning, the restaurant opened under a strange hush. The usual chatter before the rush was gone. Even the clatter of plates seemed hesitant. Word had spread fast. The CEO was returning for a staff meeting, and no one could ignore the weight of what had happened. Sophie arrived early, uncertain if she should even be there. Her eyes were swollen from a sleepless night, but her posture remained gentle, dignified, almost too forgiving for what she'd endured. Jake sat at the corner table, staring into his untouched coffee. His usual arrogance had evaporated, replaced by a hollow kind of shame. Mia paced by the window, wringing her hands, while Carla sat silently, her guilt heavy but honest. When Mr. Harris entered, the air seemed to shift again, calm, deliberate, like the moment before a storm that chooses mercy instead of destruction. "Sit," he said softly. They obeyed. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. "I've reviewed the footage," he began, his tone steady, "and I've spoken with management." A few heads lowered. "One is being dismissed, not today." Jake exhaled, relief flashing briefly across his face, but it faded quickly when Mr. Harris continued. "But let me be clear. This restaurant doesn't just serve food, it serves dignity, and last night, that was taken off the menu." Silence blanketed the room. His words weren't meant to humiliate him, they were meant to echo. "What you did," he said, looking directly at Jake and Mia, "wasn't a prank. It was cruelty disguised as humor. And cruelty," he paused, "is the enemy of service." He turned to Carla. "You knew it was wrong but stayed silent. Why?" Carla's voice broke as she answered, "Because I didn't want them to turn on me." Mr. Harris nodded slowly. "Fear makes accomplices of us all." Then his gaze softened as he looked towards Sophie. "And you, Miss Sophie," he said, "sat through humiliation with grace. You chose compassion when you could have chosen anger. That's leadership." Sophie blinked, confused. "Leadership?" He smiled faintly. "Yes, the ability to remain kind when it costs you something." The room shifted. Guilt gave way to quiet reverence. Even the staff who hadn't been involved lowered their eyes in respect. Mr. Harris clasped his hands behind his back. "Here's what will happen," he said. "Starting next week, this restaurant will host an internal mentorship program, one focused on empathy, ethics, and management." He turned to Sophie. "You'll help me run it." The words landed softly, but their meaning hit like a wave. Sophie's lips parted in disbelief. "Me, sir? But I'm just—" "You're exactly who you need to be," he interrupted gently. Jake looked down, unable to hide the tears forming in his eyes. "Sir, we don't deserve that," he said quietly. "No," Mr. Harris replied, "you don't. But sometimes we're given chances not because we've earned them, but because someone believes we can do better." The line cut through the air like a sermon. Mia wiped her eyes. For the first time, she wasn't thinking about herself, but about the person they had all hurt. Sophie hesitated before speaking. "I don't know what to say," she murmured. Mr. Harris smiled. "Say nothing. Just keep showing the same heart that got you through last night." He turned toward the group again. "You'll all learn from her, not just about service, but about humanity. Because no policy, no training manual can teach what she already lives by instinct." His gaze lingered on Sophie, a rare warmth in his voice. "And that, my friends, is what leadership looks like." The meeting ended quietly. No applause, no grand gestures, just silence filled with reflection. Jake stood up first, walking toward Sophie. "I'm sorry," he said, voice cracking. "I was cruel. You didn't deserve any of it." She looked at him for a moment, then nodded. "Thank you for saying that," she replied simply. Didn't come easily. Forgiveness, but she offered something close, understanding. That, in itself, was enough. As everyone dispersed, Mr. Harris lingered near the doorway, watching Sophie gather her things. "You still think kindness makes you weak?" he asked softly. Sophie smiled faintly, meeting his gaze. "No, sir, not anymore." He nodded once. "Good. Then maybe last night wasn't a disaster after all." And as he left, the faintest hint of pride touched his expression. Pride not in himself, but in the quiet strength of the woman who had reminded him why compassion still mattered. A week passed since that unforgettable meeting, yet the air inside La Belle Maison still carried the echo of it. The staff moved differently now. Quieter, more considerate, their laughter subdued, not cruel. Sophie worked as always, humble and graceful, avoiding the spotlight that had unwillingly found her. But Mr. Harris hadn't forgotten his words. He returned one afternoon, unannounced once more, the faint smile of a man with unfinished business. She was arranging flowers near the window when he walked in. "Miss Sophie," he said gently. She turned, startled. "Mr. Harris! I didn't expect to see you again so soon." "I imagine not," he said, his tone kind but deliberate. "Do you have a moment?" Sophie wiped her hands on her apron, nodding. "Of course, sir." He gestured toward an empty table, the same one where humiliation had once unfolded. Now it waited for something new to begin. They sat. The candlelight flickered between them, just as before, but the atmosphere was different, lighter, filled with a quiet respect. "I've been thinking about what you said that night," Mr. Harris began, "about wanting to study hospitality." Sophie blinked, surprised. "Oh, yes, sir. It's something I've always dreamed of." He nodded. "Dreams are interesting things. Sometimes they wait quietly until the right person notices them." She smiled nervously. "I suppose that's true." He leaned forward, resting his elbows on the table. "Well, Miss Sophie, I've noticed, and I'd like to offer you something. A full scholarship from our company to study hospitality and management." The words hit her like a rush of light. For a moment, she didn't breathe. "A scholarship?" she whispered, as if afraid to believe it. He nodded. "Yes. You've earned it, not with grades or connections, but with grace." Tears welled instantly in her eyes. "Sir, I don't know what to say." "Say you'll accept," he replied simply. "We need more people like you in this industry. People who understand that kindness isn't a tactic, it's a foundation." Sophie pressed a trembling hand to her mouth, overcome. Around them, the quiet buzz of the restaurant faded, as though even the world wanted to give her space to absorb the moment. "Again, I accept," she whispered. From the corner, Mia and Jake watched, unable to look away. There was no jealousy in their eyes now, only awe. "She really deserves this," Mia said softly. Jake nodded. "Yeah, she does." Carla smiled faintly, tears glistening in her eyes. Redemption didn't erase the past, but it made space for something new to grow. And in that moment, each of them realized that true leadership didn't come from authority. It came from humility. Harris reached into his jacket pocket and placed an envelope on the table. "Inside, you'll find the details, enrollment papers, contacts, and travel arrangements," he said. Sophie stared at it as if it were made of gold. "I never imagined someone like me could deserve this," she whispered. Mr. Harris smiled. "You don't have to imagine it anymore. Just promise me one thing." "Anything, sir," she said. "Never let the cruelty of others make you doubt your worth." As the CEO rose to leave, Sophie stood as well. "Thank you," she said, her voice trembling, "for seeing me." He gave a small nod. "It's easy to see light, Miss Sophie, even when others try to dim it." Then he turned, leaving the restaurant in silence. The moment felt sacred, as though something invisible and divine had passed through the room, the kind of grace that could change lives. When he was gone, Sophie sat for a while, tracing the edge of the envelope with her fingers. She looked around the restaurant. The same walls that had witnessed her shame now seemed to glow with forgiveness. The laughter that once hurt her now drifted in softly, sincere this time. And for the first time in years, Sophie allowed herself to believe in something bigger than survival, in destiny and in the quiet power of being kind, no matter the cost. That night, as she walked home, the city lights seemed brighter. She clutched the envelope to her chest, her red dress swaying gently in the evening breeze. The stars above flickered faintly, like candles echoing her hope. For once, the world didn't feel indifferent. It felt alive, as if cheering her on. Sophie smiled to herself, whispering into the night, "Maybe kindness really does come back." And somewhere far behind her, La Belle Maison stood glowing. A restaurant, a witness, a beginning. That night, long after the last guest had left, La Belle Maison sat quiet beneath its dim chandeliers. The soft hum of the refrigerators was the only sound left, a lonely kind of music that filled the space where laughter used to be. Jake sat at one of the empty tables, staring at the reflection of the lights in a half-cleaned wine glass. His phone, once a tool of cruelty, lay face down beside him. For the first time, he couldn't bear to touch it. Mia emerged from the kitchen carrying a damp cloth she didn't really need. "Still here?" she asked softly. Jake didn't answer. His voice had been trapped somewhere between guilt and disbelief. She sat across from him, folding the cloth neatly just to give her hands something to do. "I can't stop thinking about her face," Mia murmured, "the way she looked at the door that night." Jake's jaw tightened. "Yeah," he said quietly. "Me too." The sound of distant thunder rolled outside, the kind of low, rumbling storm that feels more like confession than chaos. Carla walked in next, her eyes red from crying. I stayed to help close, she said, her voice small. Jake nodded, not looking up. You don't have to. I know, she replied. But I should. The three of them sat together in silence, surrounded by spotless tables and half-melted candles. It felt like a church after a funeral. Do you think she'll ever forgive us? Mia broke the silence first, she asked. Jake let out a humorless laugh. If she does, we don't deserve it. Carla looked down at her hands. Maybe forgiveness isn't about deserving. Maybe it's about who she is. Her words lingered, soft but heavy. None of them spoke after that. The storm outside began to pour, rain streaking down the tall windows, washing the glass clean in slow, steady lines. Jake leaned back in his chair, staring up at the ceiling. You know what's messed up? He said. I thought I was funny. I thought I was proving something, but all I did was prove I'm a coward. Mia wiped at her eyes, shaking her head. We both were. The truth settled between them like dust, unwanted but undeniable. Regret, once foreign to them, had finally taken a seat at their table. Carla looked toward the table where Sophie had sat, where she had waited, believing in something that didn't exist. That candle's still there, she whispered. Indeed, the small stub of wax remained, its wick blackened, never relit. She reached over and touched the edge of the tablecloth, tracing the faint marks where Sophie's fingers had once rested. We turned someone's kindness into entertainment, she said, and she still asked them not to fire us. The rain outside grew heavier, the rhythm steady and relentless. It matched the pulsing ache in their chests. Mia stood, grabbing a mop, more out of habit than purpose. We should clean up, she said quietly. Jake nodded. Yeah. But neither of them moved right away. They sat there, letting the rain fill the silence they didn't know how to break. Each drop that hit the window sounded like an unspoken apology. Finally, Jake stood and picked up his phone. Without a word, he opened the camera gallery and deleted every clip. The sound of the confirmation tone was faint but final, like the closing of a wound. No one ever sees that, he said. Not again. Mia and Carla exchanged a glance, then nodded. It didn't erase what they had done, but it was a start, the smallest step toward atonement. When the lights finally dimmed for the night, they left the restaurant together. The rain soaked their jackets, but none of them hurried. It felt right to walk through the storm they had created. As they reached the corner, Carla turned back for one last look. Through the window, the faint glow of the candle's leftover wax flickered. In the shadows, like a memory refusing to die. Tomorrow, she whispered, we start over. And above the sound of rain and regret, somewhere deep within the night, it felt as if the world had quietly decided to forgive, not because they deserved it, but because someone had shown them what forgiveness looked like. The morning sun broke through her curtains like a quiet promise, soft, golden, forgiving. Sophie stood by the window of her small apartment, holding an envelope that had changed everything. Inside were travel papers, class details, and a letter signed in elegant script. To new beginnings, from those who finally saw you. She read it again and again, as if memorizing the moment hope became real. Her reflection in the glass no longer looked tired, it looked ready. Her first day of training felt like stepping into another world. The Hospitality Institute was bright and modern, filled with eager students dressed neatly in uniforms. Sophie clutched her notebook, trying to ignore the tremor in her hands. When the instructor, a woman with kind eyes and confident poise, greeted her, Sophie smiled nervously. "Welcome, Miss Laurent," she said warmly. "We've been expecting you." The words sent a shiver down Sophie's spine. Expecting her. She had never heard that before. In class, she listened intently, absorbing every detail about management, service, and human behavior. She learned about leadership, not the kind that commands, but the kind that uplifts. A true host, the instructor said. Seize people before profit. Sophie wrote the line carefully in her notebook, circling it twice. It reminded her of Mr. Harris, and of herself, the girl who once served tables with too much heart and too little protection. The first week passed in a blur of lessons and discovery. Sophie made new friends, people who didn't mock her optimism but celebrated it. One of them, Elena, noticed how gentle she was with everyone. You have this calm energy, she said, like you actually care. Sophie laughed softly. I do. I think that's the point. For the first time in years, she wasn't just existing in someone else's world. She was building her own. One afternoon, during a session on restaurant design, the students were asked to present their dream business. Sophie hesitated, then opened her sketchbook. Inside was the same photo that once hung in her locker, a small cafe by the sea, sunlight streaming through its open doors. This, she said, her voice trembling, it's called Sophie's Place. Her classmates smiled. It's beautiful, Elena whispered. Sophie blinked away tears. It's not just a dream anymore, she said quietly. It's a direction. Meanwhile, back at La Belle Maison, life had changed too. The mentorship program Mr. Harris had promised was underway, and the staff worked with a humility the restaurant had never seen before. Jake volunteered for extra shifts. Mia started mentoring new hires, teaching them patience instead of sarcasm. Even Carla began keeping a small journal, lessons on kindness, inspired by Sophie's example. Her name was spoken often, not with guilt anymore, but with gratitude. Months later, Mr. Harris visited the training institute unannounced, just as he had at the restaurant. He found Sophie helping a new student fold napkins properly. Her patience endless. Old habits die hard, I see, he said with a smile. Sophie turned, surprised and delighted. Mr. Harris! I had to see how our scholarship is being put to use, he said. And? She asked nervously. He smiled. Better than I could have imagined. They walked through the quiet halls together, sunlight pouring through the tall windows. You've done more than study, he said. You've inspired a culture change. Even the staff at La Belle Maison talk about you differently now. Sophie's eyes widened. They do. Yes, he said. They say the place feels warmer, and that's because of you. She looked down, humbled. I didn't do anything extraordinary, she murmured. You did, he replied. You stayed kind. That night, Sophie wrote in her notebook before bed. On a blank page, she penned the words, kindness can rebuild what cruelty tries to destroy. She underlined it twice, then closed the book, her heart steady and full. Outside her window, lights flickered like distant candles, small but countless, each one a reminder that light doesn't disappear. It multiplies when shared. And as she drifted to sleep, Sophie imagined her future cafe. The smell of coffee, the hum of laughter, the warmth of connection. Maybe one day she thought the same people who once mocked her would walk through its doors, and she would greet them not with resentment, but with grace. Because Sophie had learned the most powerful lesson of all. Forgiveness is the quietest form of strength. It began quietly, a ripple before the wave. One afternoon, a journalist contacted La Belle Maison, requesting an interview with Mr. Harris. There's a story circulating online, she explained, a video from your restaurant. Confused, he frowned. A video? She nodded. But not what you think. It's not about humiliation. It's about what you did next. Within hours, the clip spread across social media, like a spark catching dry leaves. The footage, captured by security cameras, showed the moment the prank collapsed. The laughter dying, Sophie's tears falling, and the CEO choosing calm over anger. The video didn't just reveal what happened. It revealed how he responded. People watched in silence as Sophie's grace and Mr. Harris's quiet justice unfolded in real time. Comments poured in. This made me cry. We need more leaders like this. Kindness wins. What was once a private pain had become a global lesson. At first, Sophie didn't even know. She was in class when her phone buzzed non-stop with messages from classmates and co-workers. "You're trending," Elena whispered, holding out her phone. Sophie blinked in disbelief as she saw her face on countless feeds, not as a victim, but as a symbol of dignity. "I didn't want fame," she murmured. "You didn't chase it," Elena replied. "You earned it. The world just noticed." The story spread beyond social media. News outlets covered it, calling it the waitress who changed the CEO's heart. Talk shows discussed it. Bloggers wrote essays about empathy and leadership. Even strangers began visiting La Belle Maison just to sit at the table where kindness happened. The same restaurant that once held cruelty now pulsed with new meaning, a place reborn by grace. Staff members worked with newfound pride, careful to live up to the story that saved them. Jake watched the coverage one night alone in his apartment. The glow of the screen painted his face pale, but his eyes softened as Sophie's image appeared. She was smiling gently in an interview, saying, "Forgiveness isn't weakness. It's choosing not to let someone else's darkness dim your light." Jake lowered his head, a tear slipping free. He finally understood that her strength hadn't humiliated them. It had redeemed them. "She really is something else," he whispered to no one. Mia, too, watched, this time with her mother, who clasped her hand silently. "You were part of that?" her mother asked, her voice a mix of disbelief and shame. Mia nodded slowly. "Yes, but not the good part." Her mother squeezed her hand tighter. "Then be the good part now." The words stayed with her. The next morning, Mia messaged Sophie for the first time since that night. "I'm sorry, and I'm proud of you." Hours later, a simple reply came. "Thank you, Mia. I wish you well." Forgiveness, again, quiet, complete. Mr. Harris found himself invited to conferences and leadership panels, yet, when asked about his heroic decision, he only shook his head. "It wasn't heroic," he said. "It was overdue. I just did what was right." But he always mentioned Sophie's name, insisting that she was the reason the world had witnessed compassion in motion. "I only followed her lead," he'd tell audiences. "She taught me that. Kindness is contagious if you're brave enough to show it first." Soon, donations began pouring into the company's scholarship program, enough to fund dozens of hospitality students who couldn't afford tuition. The initiative was named the Sophie Foundation. When Mr. Harris told her, she was speechless. "You didn't have to do that," she said, tears in her eyes. "Maybe not," he replied. "But some stories deserve to feed others." The first recipients of the scholarship sent her letters, calling her an inspiration. Sophie read each one with humility and disbelief. Everywhere she went, people recognized her, but she never behaved like someone who had gone viral. She still took the subway, still smiled at strangers, still carried herself with quiet warmth. "You're Sophie from the video, right?" people would ask. She would laugh softly. "Just Sophie," she'd reply, "the same one who still spills coffee sometimes." Fame never changed her. If anything, it made her even more grounded. Her lesson to the world remained simple. Be good, even when no one's watching, because someone always is. And in the end, it wasn't the scandal that defined La Belle Maison, or the shame that followed, but what grew from it: empathy, change, and connection. The restaurant thrived, but more than that, it healed. People came not for luxury, but for the story behind the service. Each plate carried a piece of that redemption. And in the soft glow of the same chandeliers that once witnessed cruelty, kindness reigned quietly, proving that compassion, once awakened, never truly fades. Months had passed since the story of the fake date changed Sophie's life. The world had moved on, as it always does, but for those who lived it, nothing was the same. La Belle Maison stood brighter than ever, the air inside lighter, warmer, almost sacred. On a crisp autumn morning, a black sedan stopped outside its familiar glass doors. Sophie stepped out, her red dress hidden beneath a beige coat, her eyes glimmering with both nostalgia and calm. She had come home, not as a waitress, but as something far more. Inside, the staff was busy preparing for the day. When Mia saw her through the window, she froze, dropping the towel she was holding. "Is that—" she whispered. Jake turned and nearly dropped the tray in his hands. Carla covered her mouth, her eyes filling instantly with tears. Sophie smiled softly as she walked in, the bell above the door chiming just like it used to. The same sound that once marked her humiliation now sounded like an overture to peace. Mr. Harris stood near the bar, reviewing paperwork, and when he saw her, his expression softened into pride. "Miss Sophie," he greeted, stepping forward. "Welcome back." "Thank you, sir," she said warmly. "I heard there was an opening." He raised an eyebrow. "Indeed. Assistant manager." Her lips curved in quiet disbelief. "Really? Really?" he said. "It's time this place had leadership that remembers what it means to serve." And just like that, the circle began to close. Her first steps through the dining room felt surreal. Every corner carried a memory. The laughter that once mocked her, the table where she waited alone, the flickering candle that had become her silent witness. But there was no bitterness in her heart now, only gratitude. She ran her fingers gently over the polished wood of that same table and whispered, "Thank you," not for the pain, but for what it had taught her. The staff gathered nervously near the counter, unsure of how to greet her. Sophie turned toward them with that same warmth that had once set her apart. "We've all grown since then," she said softly. "Let's keep it that way." Jake stepped forward first. "Sophie," he said, voice breaking, "I still don't know how to make it right." She smiled gently. "You already have, Jake. You changed." "That's enough." The forgiveness in her tone felt like sunlight after a storm. Mia approached next, holding a small bouquet of lilies. "I wanted to give you this," she said shyly, "for everything." Sophie accepted the flowers with a grateful nod. "You didn't have to." "I did," Mia replied. "You made me see people differently." Carla joined them, tears streaming freely. "I prayed for this day," she said. Sophie embraced her, the three of them standing together, no longer divided by guilt or shame, but connected by grace. That afternoon, Mr. Harris gathered everyone for a small toast. "La Belle Maison isn't just a restaurant," he said. "It's a reminder that empathy feeds the soul as much as food feeds the body." He raised his glass toward Sophie. "To the woman who taught us that." The staff clinked glasses, laughter replacing the silence that once haunted the walls. The restaurant, once stained by cruelty, had become a cathedral of second chances. Later, as the sun set, Sophie walked to the window overlooking the city. The same skyline that once felt distant now glowed like an embrace. She could see her reflection in the glass, confident, composed, transformed. Behind her, the tables filled with guests, conversations flowing softly, music playing just right. She had dreamed of owning a cafe one day, but now, standing here, she realized she already had something greater, a family reborn from compassion. Before leaving for the night, Sophie placed a single candle on the table where it had all begun. She lit it carefully, the flame flickering to life once more. This time, it wasn't a symbol of waiting. It was a symbol of remembrance. The soft light danced across the room, touching every face it passed. "May we never forget what kindness can do," she whispered. The flame wavered, as if nodding in agreement, and as the restaurant lights dimmed, Sophie stepped outside, her red dress catching the glow of the street lamps, The night air was cool, but her heart was warm. Behind her, laughter and life continued, echoes of a story that had come full circle. She smiled, knowing the girl who once waited alone at a table no longer existed. In her place stood a woman who had proven that grace, when tested, can transform even cruelty into light. Night had settled over the city like velvet, soft, deep, and full of light. Sophie stood by the large window of her small office at La Belle Maison, watching the street below. The same road she once walked home on in tears now carried laughter and life. Her reflection shimmered against the glass, blending with the city lights beyond, as if past and present existed together in that single pane. For the first time, she felt complete, not because life had become perfect, but because she had made peace with every imperfection. Behind her, the restaurant buzzed softly, the murmur of diners, the clink of glasses, the low hum of piano music. Each sound told a story of change. She watched the staff move gracefully, smiling genuinely, treating every guest as if they mattered. The place had healed, not through rules or reprimands, but through understanding. And in the center of it all was that small table by the window, where a single candle still flickered every night in quiet tribute. Sophie's gaze drifted to that table, and memories flickered like film reels, her trembling hands, the hidden laughter, the moment when a stranger sat down and changed everything. It no longer hurt to remember. The pain had softened into wisdom, the shame into strength. Every scar, every tear had become part of her foundation. She smiled faintly. "You were so scared," she whispered to her younger self. "But look how far you've come." A soft knock at the door broke her reverie. It was Mr. Harris. "Working late again?" he asked with a gentle smile. "Old habits," she replied. He stepped inside, hands clasped behind his back. "You've turned this place into something remarkable," he said. Sophie shook her head. "We did." "No," he said firmly. "You reminded us why it mattered." His eyes held quiet pride. "You taught an entire company that kindness is not policy. It's legacy." After he left, Sophie sat down at her desk and opened her old notebook. Its pages filled with scribbled dreams and notes from her early days of training. On the last blank page, she wrote one final sentence. "Kindness changes more than hearts. It rewrites stories." She closed the book gently, her heart steady. Outside, the city lights glowed brighter, as if the world itself was listening. Later that night, the staff surprised her with a small gift, a framed photo of everyone together, smiling in front of the restaurant. At the bottom, a single line was engraved, "Because of you, we learned to serve with heart." Sophie's throat tightened as she traced the words with her finger. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. It wasn't fame or recognition that filled her chest. It was connection. That was what she had always wanted. When the last guest left and the lights dimmed, Sophie walked one last time through the dining room. The candle still burned on that table, its flame steady and golden. She stood before it for a moment, then whispered, "This is what kindness looks like when it wins." The flame flickered gently, as if answering her. The reflection of that small light danced across the glass windows. One spark multiplied into hundreds of tiny glows. Outside, the night air was cool, carrying the faint scent of rain and lavender. Sophie stepped onto the sidewalk, pulling her coat tighter around her. The city felt alive, awake, and so did she. Her footsteps echoed softly as she walked past the glowing sign of La Belle Maison, now a symbol not of luxury, but of compassion. Above her, the stars shimmered like approval from the universe itself. She smiled, whispering, "Maybe that's all we ever needed, to be seen, to be kind, to begin again." The camera of life pulled back slowly, rising above the streets where her journey began. the restaurant glowing like a beacon against the dark. Sophie's silhouette grew smaller, her red dress catching the lamplight one last time before blending into the city's heart. And as the world moved on, one truth remained: empathy is power, and grace never goes unnoticed. Before you go, tell us in the comments below, what part of Sophie's story moved you the most? If you believe that kindness can transform even the darkest moments, hit like, subscribe, and share this story so more people can feel its light. And don't stop here. Click on the video showing on your screen now to watch our next emotional story.